ask the professor, what is your expert opinion on this?
Concerning this petition, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was for several years representing the European Union on discussions with countries outside the European Union, like United States, Canada, Russia, on trapping standards. This was about 10, 15 years ago, and we have some legislation on particular kinds of traps. Like we are not allowed to use leg hold traps, and there are several traps which are not permitted in the European Union. So this is an issue which I have some experience of. And it certainly seems anomalous that we allow something which is just as bad as the traps which we ban, which is this glue trapping. When the first thing is that you will catch species other than the ones you are intending to catch. It's quite difficult to set it so that you don't catch protected species. It may be designed mainly for house mice, but you would catch wood mice, you would catch voles, you would catch other small mammals, you might catch birds, you might catch, there might sometimes be an effect on domestic pets of these glue traps. Although they would have to be very small pets. So that's a problem, that it's an indiscriminate method of catching. The second point is that when the animal is caught, these animals, they have the same potential for suffering as the other animals which we do protect. So mice, other rodents, they have pain and fear systems, and if you are caught by something sticky and you can't get away, there would be a very large amount of fear. There would be a very substantial response to it. So it would be a very big impact just to be caught by these traps. And then the question is what happens to them. So if the temperature is low, they may freeze. If they are there for a long enough time, they may starve. And in some cases, we know that they do starve. So there are certainly traps which would have a very large negative effect on the welfare of these animals. So in this case, I can't see that there is any good argument for keeping them, for using them, except that they work. But then we should still protect the animals which we want to control, because they are a pest. That doesn't mean you don't consider their welfare. We should be every time we are dealing with pests, we should be considering their welfare. So I would say scientifically there is good evidence that there are substantial welfare problems. There is a bycatch of species which are you don't want to catch and which are in some cases protected, and the method of killing is definitely not a humane method of killing.
Thank you. Mr. Peter Jahr.
Ja, vielen Dank. Ich möchte noch mal einen anderen Aspekt betonen. Das schließt sich auch an die Studie.
Thank you. I'd like to just stress another aspect which is linked with this in the European Union. We've always been focusing on the internal market and harmonizing that. First of all, we worked on other issues, and then farm animals were brought into this. Now, some member states have different legislation. There is prohibition, there isn't. Depending on the member state, it's again our internal market affairs committee that really focuses on these issues. But it's naive to imagine that as an EU citizen, I can transport, even if there is a prohibition in one country, that I can go to another country, and we have the free movement rules within the internal market. So other member states really will have to think about, the question of implementation of their bans if we don't have borders within the European Union. So I'm just wondering what my colleagues think as to whether we should close this petition, whether we can close this or not. I mean, a lot of what is happening is in breach of the internal market. I'm not sure that we should close this. Either, we send back to committee or I don't know. I'm asking the colleagues what they feel about this. I think it's an internal market issue. or perhaps, what the professor said was also correct, but there are different, different sets of legislation here in the EU covering this.
Sì, Presidente.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, yes, I agree that other than clear support for animal welfare, it's also a question of the internal market. I agree with my colleague in particular, given that there are different legislation and the market is fragmented. What I'm wondering is, are there more valid alternatives in existence which don't cause death or animal suffering? In that case, why do we not try to promote the alternatives? Because these are, there might be problems of hygiene and public health, so I know that we need a certain amount of controls, but I am sure that there must be solutions that are more effective and provide greater support. So perhaps we could get more information on the famous best practices used in some member states that have banned the use of this type of trap and promote them, the use of them throughout the Union, so as to promote animal welfare. And so I would keep it open.
Please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would also recommend keeping this petition open. As Professor Broom said, this is a very painful, it's a really horrible way of dying. This kind of glue trap, dying in that way, well, that has no place in a modern Europe. And you also have to say, as Peter Jaar said, we're talking about harmonization within Europe, that we have an area in which we have the same basic values. And here we're not just having economic values, we have certain ethical values as well, moral values, and I think they have to be taken into account in all member states. So I would also be in favor of keeping this open.
Okay, that's important.
Yeah, just